I'm Valentino. I'm delighted that you're all here. I'm excited for our panel. Just quick intro of me. I teach at the Cleveland Institute of Art. I teach psychology there, and sometimes I teach comics classes. I teach graphic medicine there. I am scholar in residence at Cleveland Public Library, and I'm a maternal depression therapist at Ohio Guidestone, which is a Medicaid-funded agency in Cleveland. So I'm interested in mental health, and so mostly in mental health and comics. So that might come up. All right, so I'm going to do some quick introductions of everybody, just some bios, just to get that out of the way. And then if all of you that are panelists, though, if you would also sort of just give your own introduction to your work, if you wouldn't mind. After I do some quick bios, you can go through and just sort of tell us more about you, and maybe throw up some images. Lisa, I think you may have been the only one that used the PowerPoint, which is fine. So you just let me know when you're ready to go, and I'll share my screen. Okay, so just go quickly. So Sequoia, I'll start with Sequoia. So Sequoia Bostick is a comics artist and illustrator living in Cleveland, Ohio. She is co-creator of Vagabond Comics, an all-ages, independently published comics anthology based out of Cleveland, Ohio. It's an awesome anthology. You can get copies of it at Carol and John's Comics, or I think probably at the Vagabond Comics website too. I just usually get mine at Carol and John's, which I like, because then you get to support the comic shop and local comics artists. I'm going to do short bios for everybody. Greg Anderson Elysée is a Haitian-American, Brooklyn-born writer, filmmaker, model, and educator. He is the writer and creator of the comic book series East Nana. I think I'm saying that right. If I'm not, please correct me when you go. The Were Spider. Lisa Kollins is the founder and director of the Superhero Project, which is guided by principles of inclusion, representation, imagination, and joy, and uses creative thinking and the arts to inspire youth with serious illnesses and special needs. Jay Kalagayan of Mest Comics are self-published out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Mest is the nickname for the Metropolitan Sewer District. Brings sewer management to science fiction. It's a really fun series. I got to talk to Jay earlier this year, and it definitely is really fun. I'm excited for you to show more of your work. And Awet Moges, I don't know how to say your last name. A part-time lecturer at CSULB, is the writer and artist of Pantheon, is the first among its kind, the first graphic novel.
That's how it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like? Okay.
It's like a...
Sorry. I should have asked ahead of time. It's the first graphic novel by a deaf person, Pantheon, Heterotopia, an Eritrean America, and the first of a brand new genre, pan-futurism, which also sounds super fun. Okay. All right, so that is my short intro as the moderator. I'm excited to get to know all of you better. I know some of you and others I maybe not. So, we'll go from there, and if everybody wants to sort of start to present themselves, their work, we can go in order of how you were introduced, if you'd like. That sounds good. So, Sequoia, if you want to go first.
Yes. So yeah, like you said earlier, my name is Sequoia Bostick. I'm a freelance illustrator here in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm originally from Tennessee, so I like an outside perspective, I guess, in terms of like being an artist in Cleveland and also just kind of loving everything about it at the same time. I do co-create Vagabond Comics. So this is our last issue that just came out, issue 12, that came out actually during the pandemic last year. So we've been producing it for about like 5 or 6 years now. I believe since 2015 actually. And it's been going strong ever since. We are planning on releasing a new issue maybe sometime this year. And also like on top of that, I'm like a teaching artist, and so I work with the kids here in Cleveland at a variety of different schools around the area. And then on top of that, yeah, as a freelancer, I get to do a lot of different stuff. So yeah, like I do children's books, I do comics, I work on my own personal stuff. And I guess I can share my screen and bring up my website. Let's see.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So Yeah, like I said, I do like a variety of things. So client work. I actually just finished something up with the Ohio Superhero Project, or rather the Superhero Project. So it's really cool to see Lisa Kollins on here because I did just like finish up another drawing with that. And also this project that I just worked on, which is a zine about period poverty. So that's like a subject that I definitely want to raise awareness about, and also just being able to supply materials to teens who are in need of these supplies, these feminine products, and also to create a zine about it was really fun. But yeah, you can also check out like comics that I've done. I have a large, I guess, thing full of comics, but also Vagabond is where I do a lot of my work. So a lot of comics that are autobio or based on true stories, like this one that was based on this back in Memphis, Tennessee. I used to walk by it as well. That I always thought that there was something living in it. So yeah, we created a story about it, which is super fun. And on top of that, you can also purchase copies of Vagabond Comics at our store in V here, where you can get copies of the book, and also digital copies on a Gumroad, which all the links to that stuff is on the site, so you can check it out there.
All right, thank you.
All right.
All right. Greg, would you like to go next? Sort of give us some intro, show us some images, do a little Dog and Pony show.
I forgot to follow up on Vagabond. That book looks dope. But,
it is dope. And Sequoia did a wonderful workshop for us at the Cleveland Public Library. Sequoia's work is I really love Vagabond. I love everything that it represents, and so yeah, it is dope for sure.
Yeah, and if you ever get a chance to meet my partner who works with me as well on Vagabond Comics, Amalia DiGirolamo, she is the editor of the book, so she's the one who really kind of brings it all together. I like to talk, and that's me.
Yeah, no, good. Thank you for mentioning her. Amalia is also awesome.
Thank you. So yeah, my name is Greg Anderson Elysée. I'm the writer creator of Is Nana the Were Spider. We've had 4 different books so far. And pretty much what I wanted to do with this series is use it as a way to introduce people to more Black mythological gods, heroes from various countries, whether it's from countries in Africa or Caribbean, African-American folklore, folktale, because I always grew up on European fairy tales and Greek mythology. To this day, I still love them. But at a point in my life, like around high school, I realized, do Black folks have our own gods and heroes? And everyone knows like John Henry and a little bit of Anansi, depending on where you were raised. And so as I got older, I got more interested in that. So a lot of my works tend to represent that aspect of me trying to find a way to help us reclaim our roots and showcase that we have our own gods and heroes from various aspects of the Black diaspora. I guess I'll share my screen real quick as well. So yeah, here is my web store here. Wait, can I see? Wait, one second. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I think it's fine if we take time to do this because it's a panel about representation, and so I think part of it is you all showing your work, and so I think in this moment, like this is it's important. So take your time showing stuff.
I'm trying to figure out the share screening thing.
Oh yeah. So are you trying to share a tab or what's behind your or it will give you the option.
So this is my web store here. So you'll be able to get different aspects, the different books that we have of the series, and we have some short previews as well. It's also available through both digital and physical, everything like that. So yeah, as I said, it's very action-based as well as fantasy horror, but there's also a lot of humor and comedy in it. And one of the aspects that I try to really focus on is the relationship between father and son, Anansi and his son is Nana. Given that I feel when it comes to a lot of fantasy, we don't quite get father and son stories between Black families. And I wanted to showcase a little bit of something like that while also putting with the fact that they're very different. And even though he is trying to strive and relate to his father and live up to him, but at the same time that he is trying to be his own self, trying to figure out his own individuality as well. So sort of like continuing on with the tradition of where your family comes from, but also making a path for yourself and not losing sight of who you are. So yeah, that's essentially my thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. All right, Lisa, I think you're next. Do you? I think I wrote back to you and I said, "Do you want? Since you're the only, do you mind sharing your screen? That might just be easier."
I don't. That's fine.
I know I said 2 minutes ago that I was gonna do it, and then I realized I read your message and I thought, well, if you want to do it, then you're in control.
Yeah, that's fine. So, hi. I'm doing this. I know there's that pause.
Cynthia, your question's really interesting. I think we should rate. I was going to start with a different question, but I do think does anybody want to reflect on that? That is really interesting. Sort of the mix, the sort of you saying like where characters, that sort of mixing. I wonder if anybody has any thoughts on that. It makes me think of like it's almost like inherently for anyone who is underrepresented, the entrance into representation is through these other figures in some ways. They're sort of more these established figures. I wonder, I don't know. I mean, that's sort of just, I'm just wondering what that is. It's a good question. These mythological established figures, like the werewolf.
I think like when I see those kinds of characters, I see that as like trying to be safe with how they represent things, and I do find it very weird, but I guess it's better than like misrepresenting altogether. So yeah, that's really my only opinion about it.
No, that's really interesting. I think I mean that's a great response. I hadn't thought about that like that, but yeah, it is. It sort of is a safe, depending on who is introducing it, right? But I mean, like, yeah, like I mean, if like let's say DC Comics hires a white writer to introduce it, that has a particular meaning, and there is a certain safety to it, which is really interesting. As opposed to Greg, what you're doing is sort of is doing it from a new rewriting that history, which is interesting in some way. Okay, I like that answer. All right, sorry, Lisa, I interrupted you. Cynthia asked a good question, and I got excited. So go ahead, Lisa.
Absolutely, no. So I want to first say, we want to share this. I want to thank you for the invitation to be on this panel, and I want to acknowledge, first of all, that in conversations about representation, the voice of a white, able-bodied, cisgendered woman should probably not be centered. And so I just want to reinforce, I'm here on behalf of the organization that I direct, which really values, as Valentino said in the introduction, inclusion, representation, and joy. And that's the Superhero Project. In all of the images that we create. We work with kids who have serious illnesses and special needs, and interview them about what's important to them, how they want to make the world a better place, what kinds of tools and powers they would need to do that. And then each child is matched up with an artist who actually designs the character that they've described. Sequoia mentioned that she's been a volunteer with us before. This is her latest character, Sassy, the one there on the right. When we talk about representation in terms of the Superhero Project and inclusion, we're talking about race, ethnicity, and religion, but also and significantly ability. So we work with kids who have lifelong special needs, who have physical disabilities, cognitive or neurological differences. kids who have life-altering illnesses or life-shortening illnesses. And we know that oftentimes individuals with special needs or with illnesses are marginalized. And when their illness or their disability intersects with some of the other traits, that then they become even more so on the outskirts of the community, which is why these images are so powerful, are so joyful, and can really be transformational for the families who we represent. I would love to share this short video. I don't know, Cynthia thought it would be a good way to sort of talk about our commitment, about the Superhero Project's commitment to representation, and it really uplifts the voice of Amanda King, who is a local artist, activist, and the head of Shooting Without Bullets. It's very short, just a few minutes. Would that be all right, Valentino? Should I show that now?
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me. If that's good to everybody else, it's only a couple minutes. I saw the video, so yeah, I'd say go for it.
Okay. And there are on YouTube, so we can turn on the closed captioning as well.
Representational justice is an artistic practice that uses image making to honor the full humanity of people of color. Practitioners of representational justice use artistic production to counter dominant narratives about race and power by showing the beauty, dignity, and strength of communities at the margins of society. Representational justice reclaims space in visual culture for people who are systematically excluded from full participation in society. For youth especially, it is an important opportunity to say in the face of othering, I am beautiful. Interventions around race and politics are orchestrated through images. To see the full spectrum of marginalized individual identities represented in images is to free us all from our nation's history of inhumanity and to usher us into a more just and equitable future. The Superhero Project brings representational justice to the community by visually transforming youth of color facing serious illness or disabilities into the superheroes they are inside, limitless in power and brave in the face of injustice. The superhero alter egos created by the youth reimagine self-portraiture. They function to affirm their dignity and counter stereotypes about disabilities. Above all, they elevate youth of color with disabilities from one of the most marginalized and excluded groups in society to the most celebrated protectors of the universe. Their visions motivate us all to use our talents to affect change in the struggle for racial equity and justice.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. All right. Just so we'll keep going, and then so Greg, I note that you have an answer for when we're done. We'll circle back to that question, and we can start there. But thank you, Lisa. Awet, would you like to go next?
Okay, sure. Hi. I'm Awet. I'm from Eritrea. I was born deaf. I was in Ethiopia. I moved here. I had no communication. I had to learn sign language. At that time, there was no access to media except for one thing. It was just comic books. So that's the reason I got into comic books. I started reading them and I learned how to speak English and I also learned sign as well. I was involved in a club at a state university and they taught American Sign Language. So I remember growing up, I was going to the library and I would always constantly search for like mythology. That was my go-to. And all the books in the library were on mythology. From the children's section to the adult section, I read them all. So I realized that there was one comic book that I could never find. And that book had different art in it that had to be created. So that's how I came up with Pantheon. So the concept behind this book was, well, let me explain it to you. So mythology is in our past, and that kind of sort of carries over in today society, but we kind of lose touch with our roots a bit. So it's like, well, what will we use in substitution of that? So it's kind of like a preview for our current society. So, back in the day we had mythology, but now currently, just thinking about when I was a little boy looking for books in mythology, we had stories after those books were written. So it was like we needed more of that. So my envision for this was just that anywhere we can put it in the world, anywhere on this earth, any species, any life, anybody, that leaves us to kind of be a little bit more radical with our thinking, not believing in God and not believing that there is a God there. So we kind of sort of have that bit of a disconnect there. So that's why, that's the purpose of me writing Pantheon, just to show representation of this system that is just not perfect. And we all have ways to improve. We know that we tend to stick with the old system from prior, but we need to get into a more current one. I wrote this in 2018. My second book I just wrote last year during the pandemic, which was this one. One second. So I also have artwork in this one as well. It's called Art of the Pantheon, which means all God. So there was one comic that it was a story. It kind of is mainstream for today. And I was wondering, could I share my screen with you guys? And then maybe you can toggle over to a tab. I hope I don't mess this up. You guys see that okay?
Mhm, mhm.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Cynthia, for that.
I love that. That was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Awet, for sharing that. Sorry, I was Cynthia wrote in the chat about heterotopia. Thank you for telling us what it was.
No problem.
Say it again.
Were you guys able to see it with no problem?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time using the screen share, so I was kind of a bit iffy with it.
Oh yeah, no, you did it perfectly.
That was good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have more that I want to expand on, but I'll let you finish up. But I was born deaf, but at the same time, I did wanted to show that a deaf immigrant from other countries, they can speak. And the universal theme is talking about mythology and fantasies from all kinds of walks of life. You know, just having I'm a deaf man, I'm Black, and I also have the ability to communicate, to draw well, to speak well.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Jay, I'm sorry, I skipped over you. I realized, I think you were before or what, but Jay, you can go now. I'm sorry, I skipped over you. I felt bad, but
oh, it's all right. It's all right.
You get to end the introductions.
Oh yeah, that's how I like it. No, just I'm trying to share screen. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
All right. So my name is Jay Kalagayan, and I'm the writer and publisher of a comic book called Mest. Mest is the nickname for the Metropolitan Sewer District, MSD there. And it stars a sewer worker named Lilliput. And she is kind of our tour guide to the weird, the wet, and the wild world. But all she's got is a shovel. I'm going to show that in a second. Yeah, there she goes. All she's got is a shovel, and things like giant worms are trying to stop her from clearing out the tunnels. When I talk about the inspiration of this book, I talk about my daughters. As a parent, you get the privilege of introducing your children to things you love. But as you introduce them to the things you love, you might see that maybe it's not as gender equitable, or maybe it's more homogenized as far as race, or maybe some of the characters' choices aren't choices you'd make now. So they in turn reintroduce those things to you. And I noticed there were holes or different things that were missing. So I sought out different stuff like Miyazaki films and different creators here and tried to introduce that. But collecting comic books since I was 9 years old, I wanted to contribute maybe something different. So I wanted to create a character that was a strong character, an able character who happens to be female, who happens to be Asian. And so when I take my daughters with me to the my comic book store or any bookstore around the area, what's really great is they get to see someone who looks like them on the shelves. So publishing this book, the artist is Dylan Spieg, and we're both out of Cincinnati. And we published 2 seasons, and it's free online at our website at I put it in the chat. And we just published our 3rd. That's digital now, and it'll be going to print. And we're already working on the 4th season as well. So it's been really a great opportunity to do independent comic books and really get the word out, and just try and add something different to all the different choices out there.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, do we want to run circle back to Cynthia's question, which I thought was a really good question? Then we can go through the questions we had asked. But I know, Greg, you had a comment that you were going to make about sort of mixing the where character. What you had an answer. Did you want to share that?
So, I mean, I think it goes back to what you guys were saying as well. It depends on where it's coming from, who is fabricating the story, who's creating it. And I think the imagery of, say, like the mixture of animals with humans, the anthropomorphic. Yeah, a lot of it goes back to even cultural. You know, a lot of original African stories, the main characters are animals, you know, and that also became a thing when it came to Africans coming to America, like where we had like Brer Rabbit becoming one of our folklore characters as well. And I think over time, that has become a safe thing that we see, because when you have like a lot of animated films that do depict Black leads, they turn into something else. And there's also even a theory of some of it being misrepresentation, like say for Cyborg with Teen Titans. Some people see that now as an emasculation of the Black man. So it's, and to the point where in order for some Black characters to exist next to these superior white heroes, they need something to depend on, that they need to depend on something to showcase that they're enough to be a hero. So there's a whole bunch of different interpretations. It always comes down to, as well as, who was telling the story, why they're telling the story, and so on.
Thank you. All right, well, let's start with some questions. Thank you all for your introductions. As I said before, I think I wanted to give ample time for that, because part of it, you know, it's about representation in comics, and I wanted you all to share the images of what you're doing to just focus on representation in comics. And I think the best argument forward and the best thing we can do on this panel is just show images of the work that's being done. But so for the second half of this, you know, of our panel, I'll just have some questions, and, you know, hopefully others will come up and we can respond to each other. But I think, you know, we can start with, can you remember the first time you saw yourself represented in comics, and can you describe that experience? It may not be a good experience. I can, from my own experience, and I'm a queer Middle Eastern man, and let me tell you, not many Middle Eastern people are represented well in comics. I can, you know, it wasn't necessarily positive, but I don't know if anyone can sort of share that experience, or if it's, I know, if you don't want to share that experience, maybe a representation in comics that you thought was groundbreaking, even if it's not of like exactly related to you. So I'm thinking of, Lisa, if there's a good example you have, you know, of something that maybe you've used, or anyway, who would like to start?
I will.
Okay.
This is Awet.
Go ahead.
Hey, so yeah, I remember when I was a little boy, I would say probably 5th grade, around that time. So I was going into it was like a local store, like a convenience store, and I was looking for the comics, and I was looking for Superman. So I thought that somebody took over, like it looked like somebody had took over his body. It was weird, but it was pretty decent art. And it was the first time that I had ever saw a person that actually signed in the comic book. And I think I forget the name of it. It was from Teen Titans. It was taken from that, and they were like doing signs in it. But the comic, he couldn't speak, but he signed. He could hear, but he didn't. And I found out, I'm like, what? We're probably the same. I have somebody who can sign in a comic. This is pretty awesome. Nice. I think his name was Jericho. I think that was the character's name.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was Jericho. So I was looking at that comic, and I was like, whoa, they have a character that can sign. And one thing that saved the day is that he can transform his body to force himself to take over Superman's body. So it was like, wow, he's a hero who can sign, and he could also transform himself and take over another being. but you know, most of the time that's negatively depicted. You know, if they can't hear, it's like, oh, well, they can't hear. But it was pretty interesting. So, and thank you for that link too. I just got it. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Awet. I don't know that story. I have to look it up. I'll admit I don't read many Superman stories, but that one sounds particularly interesting. I have to read that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Who else would like to go?
It was I think it was the second or third issue of that comic. It was when Superman was beat up in Teen Titans.
Okay.
Nice.
For me, when I was a kid, I was a kid who liked anime and manga. So I actually grew up reading those things before I started reading, like, you know, DC and Marvel and like all the other indie comics and stuff like that. So a character that comes to mind was this high school kid named Bob Makihara, and I'll bring up a picture of him because the unique thing about that was that he looked just like my brother and my older brother, who was a few years older than me, but he was also secretive. So like I never knew what he was doing, and like he went to a different school than me and everything. So I always thought, oh, I wonder what my big brother's up to. And he looks just like this guy who so I thought, oh, like this is my brother, and like he's in the judo club, which his school definitely didn't have. But like I would read this comic and I would always just be like, oh yeah, this is totally what he's doing every day. He's beating up punks in an alley, or he's like doing weird, goofy stuff. And so like that was the first time I like ever saw like a character that looked like me or looked like my relatives, and I thought that it was really interesting. And I know in like manga specifically, like Black characters are not always represented well. They do tend to like exaggerate a lot. So like you never see like a really like, I guess like pretty is the only way I can describe it, looking versions of like African Americans or people of color. It's always like something that's horribly exaggerated, and that's like a whole nother topic. But I did like after like I think the early 2000s, you did start seeing more people of color in like manga and in shows like Bleach and Yu-Gi-Oh and all of that stuff that would come out in the early 2000s. So I did like navigate towards those characters a lot more than I would navigate towards like mainstream comics.
I'd say for me, I was before comic books, I was huge on like Hercules and Xena, Power Rangers, the 90s X-Men show. Like those were my obsessions. And I remember like there's two answers to this. So for Hercules, I was watching Hercules when Gina Torres's character came as Nebula. She had like a couple of episodes where she guest starred, and I remember thinking like, yo, she is beautiful. This is a beautiful Black woman. And realizing that I barely saw any Black people on that show. So she definitely stood out to me, especially in a fantasy show like that I was obsessed with. And watching the 90s X-Men series, being introduced to Storm, you know, already like she steals every scene, especially how dramatic she is. So she steals the show. But I remember when Bishop showed up, and he was like the first Black male X-Men character. And it was just like me seeing like a Black dude who's involved in this type of fantastical setting. And so by the time when I started learning, oh, these are comic books, you know, and finding a comic book shop, the first thing, aside from Superboy, I was obsessed with because of a commercial, but I was like, I want to find a comic that has Bishop on it, you know, and so that pretty much set the tone for characters I'd be interested in, because if even though I wasn't really hung up on race as a kid, because to me it was just like everyone, I'm exposed to everything, but it did resonate to me when I saw somebody of my skin tone in a type of fantastical setting, and I definitely took notice of that.
I've been collecting comics since I was 9, and you go to the drugstore, or you go to the convenience store, the gas station, something like that. You'd see the spinner rack, and they had limited selection. And honestly, I didn't see anyone my skin color. I didn't see anyone of Asian descent or Filipino. And so it was probably years until I'd see like maybe like Shang-Chi maybe. And even then I was like, well, I don't want that comic book. I don't want karate. I want ray blasts and, you know, super strength, and I don't want karate. What? So I really didn't see myself as far as a character that might look like me as far as skin color. But as Greg mentioned, X-Men, you know, they're the outlaws. They're the outsiders. They're kind of like no one accept them, and they're awkward in their own bodies, or a lot of them are, because they're training with their powers and stuff. So I definitely related to that, and even though I got to read like the Shang-Chi stories later, and they were really good, I'll admit, as a kid, I was kind of repelled by them. I was like, oh no, I want real superheroes. I didn't think of karate as a superpower. And then, so I think in my adulthood, I've definitely actively sought out different creators, different stories, and it matters so much to me now. But it is amazing how there was nothing when I was growing up in the 80s that really represented a lot of different people. I would say X-Men's probably the best one, and they had that international team. You know, you got a Russian, you got Storm, who's from Africa. You know, so that was probably the most that I'd ever seen. Oh, and Sunfire, they had Sunfire, but no one liked him. So anyway,
I know. Nobody likes Sunfire.
I know, it's like the one character nobody likes him.
I love that character.
So I mean, for me personally, I came to comics from a totally different angle. I'm Jewish, and I was always sort of raised on the stories of the authors of so many of the old time superhero stories, you know, knowing that they were Jewish and looking for themes of being the outsider and not fitting in and hiding your identity. And so that's kind of where that was the connection I had more than with individual characters. But as I've been doing the superhero project work, I've been really inspired by the new work that I've seen. So the one probably that I think is the coolest is Joshua Leonard, who has created Team Supreme, and I don't know if anyone is familiar with them, but this is Team Supreme, and they are super cool. And each of these characters, one of them has autism. I think this young woman is visually impaired. He's in his wheelchair. They all have different special needs, and so he's really created this representational kind of story, and that's Josh there. So that's who I'm really inspired by watching his work develop and seeing what's going to become of those characters.
Thank you. Well, I don't know Team Supreme, so thank you. Also, I have to say, Greg, you are the first person I know that likes Sunfire. I'm glad we found the person that likes Sunfire. So good. All right. Well, so we've achieved that. That is a momentous moment in my life where I found someone that actually likes the character. All right. Well, let's keep going though. But so you know, obviously, in the past several years, we've seen more. We've seen stronger calls for inclusion, diversity, equity in comics. How do you feel that the comics industry, and when I use that term, I mean whatever you think of as a comics industry / community, and you can speak to it in either like your local comics community or the big two, however you want to think about it, or independent comics. How do you think that the comics community and comics industry, and or both, have sort of responded to these calls, and what do you think still needs to be done? I know that's a big question, so you can answer that however you'd like.
I think that if you don't mind, I'll tackle that one first. No, I think the big companies, they want diversity, But and I think in later years, they're really trying to do diversity as far as, say, a Black character, an Asian character, or a dominant character that happens to be female. But they're also getting the writers that reflect that, or the artists that reflect that character, because before in the 80s, they'd introduce a Black character, but it was written by a white character. And that's not to say that it still wouldn't be written well, but I think diversifying the artists and the writers and the inkers and the team that do those stories, I think is essential. And I think they're recognizing that more now than they were. I would say, as independent creators, I think it's important for us to create new characters, because those large companies, I will admit, to a lot of people, Green Lantern is Hal Jordan. I don't like how I call it an inherited mantle, like an inherited mantle. So, well, we have 5 different Green Lanterns that cover the spread of diversity. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I like it when it's an original character that can grow and be created. So yes, Black Lightning has the name Black in front of it, but still, at least there wasn't a lightning before that, or a White Lightning or something like that. So you have original characters rising up. And I know with the big companies, they don't create a lot of new characters because they're trying to just work with the characters they have. But as far as inherited mantles, like a Green Lantern or even a Captain Marvel or something like that, I like a surge of independent creators that they're not even allowed to play with the copyrights, so they're creating their own characters. Or like Greg and what they are taking past mythology and making it their own, and introducing that to new audiences, which I think is really important.
I agree. Thank you.
That's good. That's pretty much what I was gonna say. So I was saying, like, also just like, oh no, that's good. I think, like, if we can get it all in there, like at the beginning, because that's pretty much the problem, I think, is that they are just reinventing the same character over and over again. So it like doesn't leave a lot of room for, you know, a story to grow with a person of color involved in it. But then, like, with independent creators, like there was a ton of books that feature just like people of color throughout like the entire indie comic book world. Like I actually finished reading Bottom Feeders with Ben Passmore, like, which is really cool. It's literally just telling a story about like this abandoned like apartment complex. But the main characters are like people of color. So it's like, you know, relatable, cool stories, not always superhero, not always, you know, buried in like that mantle passing and all of that.
Thank you. Anybody else want to respond? Or I mean, I think the question of like, I think that sort of passing on of identities is super interesting in comics, though. I mean, it's so complicated because like we have so many like Robins, right? We have all these Robins, and yet mostly female characters and characters of color rarely ever pass on a mantle. It works it works the other way around, where a white female character will identify with the male character. I'm thinking of Batgirl, I'm thinking of Hawkeye, I'm thinking of a bunch of stuff. It's very rare that a character will identify with a female character will identify with a female character. Examples, obviously, of course, being Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel, but it's very rare that any character that is in a marginalized group in any sort will pass on power, which is so representative of just, a larger problem that I don't think creators consciously recognized for the past 75 years or so. But it's absolutely true that, there is it's the problem of like, generational wealth or other ways of passing on through to other people. And we see even the mantles are always coming from these white characters. But yeah, I do think it's interesting when we have moments where where you'll see a character that will identify with the previous one, that hopefully will create a tradition that just moves beyond, you know, another Flash, another Green Lantern, another Batman, another Captain America, right? But we'll see. But I mean, I do think that's such an interesting, like, just discussion about not only about legacy, which as mainstream comics are all about. I mean, DC and Marvel are always stressing legacy, and there's another one. Marvel just had like a whole series they came out with that was I don't remember what they called it, but it was similar. Like, they'll always use language that promotes like legacy and inheritance, and yet it's always white inheritance, male white inheritance, right? Just sad.
Valentino, I think Awet has something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. I start talking and I look away and I'm not looking at the screen. Sorry. Go ahead, Awet.
One moment for the interpreter, just to clarify. Sorry, our videos fell out. So there was a character. His name, it was David Hasselhoff. He was like a white character. But when Marvel started writing like the ultimate storyline from 2000 on, then they moved the Fury on to Samuel L. Jackson. So it was interesting to see that transition of representation. And now in the movie, like 2008 onward, it's still been Samuel L. Jackson. So I don't know what you call that, like representation, like transformative, or how would you guys call it? Like from a character that was originally white and then transferred over to a black character. Like, how would you guys call that?
I don't know. Does anybody have an answer? I'm not sure.
I would call it tricky. I would say that sometimes there's no argument. Like, I think when they use Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, I don't think anyone like was upset. But then trying to think of other characters that they've, like when Jason Aaron had a new Thor that happened to be female, I think there was a lot of problems at first, even though that ended up being an amazing story. But still, I think so. I guess it's the who and the what and the when, because I think in Justice League, the cartoons, everyone who saw those cartoons were really confused when they heard about Hal Jordan, because they're used to John Stewart being the Green Lantern, because an entire generation saw him in the cartoons.
Yeah.
And
I
then
stopped for that.
Yeah.
And the same thing with gender, because everyone knew Starfire from Teen Titans, the cartoon. And then when they launched the New 52, they had a very scantily clad, sexy Starfire, and people were freaked out, even though those in the 80s who grew up in the 80s, they're used to both Starfires because they've seen the Starfire from Teen Titans, they've seen Starfire from the cartoons. But anyway, so I guess the answer is tricky. It's the only thing I do.
I do like, I want to answer Cynthia's question too, but I do think what you're saying is really interesting about John Stewart. We see how quickly a generation can learn to identify with this new with a new character, right? It didn't take very long. I mean, for me as well, I had read Green Lantern comics, so I knew who Hal Jordan was, but I thought John Stewart was fantastic, and he is the Green Lantern in my mind because I love the Justice League cartoon so much. But that, as you said, an entire generation knows of John Stewart. It doesn't take very long to teach people. The immediate sort of knee-jerk response, as with the Jason Aaron Thor story, you know, that lasts such a short time that it's so interesting how quickly we can teach a generation of people to recognize an African American man as Green Lantern.
Mhm.
Okay, so wait, Cynthia, you said I'm hoping Jay will talk about. Oh yeah, do you want to? I don't know if you can see the chat, Jay.
I'm hoping Jay will talk about Fat Mucket as part of the answer. I read that blog and I thought it was cool. The answer as far as representation. Oh, okay. Okay, I think I got it. So in my comic book, I let the art do most of the talking, and but as a writer, I still want to say a lot. So at the end of my comic book, you'll see a section called the Fat Mucket Files, and Fat Mucket is Lilliput, the sewer workers manager, and in her own way, she writes out her report on what's going on with a lot of attitude. And for me, it's a great way to just convey extra facts or little things you didn't know. You know, the writer in me that wants to be verbose, but I know it's comic book, so you got to let the art tell the story. But I get this little backup section. I guess with Fat Mucket, who we introduced what she looks like in season 3, Fat Mucket to me is one of the most influential characters in comic books to me growing up was Amanda Waller from the Suicide Squad. She was an amazing character. She came out of nowhere. This woman who is short is standing up to Batman, you know, and giving him the what for, you know, and I love that. And so I'm channeling my inner Amanda Waller to create this character and just kind of give it that great attitude. And so I think that's what Cynthia was talking about, is just trying to give different perspectives and representation, and not, I don't like the term colorblind. I don't think that exists, but being conscious of what you're doing in the characters, and really just thinking about balance.
This is Awet. I wanted to make a comment too. When I'm drawing my characters, I want them to look believable, and I want them to be either male or female, whatever their abilities are. If it's a female, I want her to have scars. I want her to have thick scars. I want her to have a thick shape. I don't want her to look like a pinup, like a thin pinup. I think that's just like an old style that's left from like the 90s image cartoons. But, you know, to veer off from that, you know, just the early 90s section. But it's like a long transition back to, you know, what's appropriate, something more believable, a body that's more believable, so that they can think she's super. But, you know, it's like, how is she like the She-Hulk, like how she's able to beat up like her enemies, like without, how's she able to do that without giving her that figure? Like we would have to give her more muscle. So, you know, like as a to draw a female's body, it's like there's no warning. Like you have to give them muscle. It's like you don't want them to look too muscular, but it's like, oh really? But you know, we have like that common warning against, you know, making a woman bulkier or hawky.
Yeah, and we can see yeah, Jay, I don't know if you want to respond to that. Just yeah. All right. Well, how are you, Cynthia? I think I just wanted to respond back to the. I mean, She-Hulk is a great example. Amanda Waller is a perfect example of a character who just came in and just takes over and is just one of the most fantastic characters in comics. Right. It shows that like you don't have to create these pinup characters. I mean, there's no need to, right? I mean, that's not what's selling. I mean, Amanda Waller is an absolutely stunning, just figure presence, like on the page, like her. She just has such a great presence as a character. Like I love her character, and I think like, and that's what works. It's just the way that they present her on the page, and she takes over, and she just you know, runs a Suicide Squad. It's great. I mean, I just love what she does on the page, and as a character, the way that she just runs the show. So Lisa, you said something. Yeah, I do think it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Right? There's a lot of really interesting new artists that are coming on the scene that are being mentored by these amazing artists that have already like broken into comics and are now introducing new creators.
I'm wondering too if the other panelists, if any of you do mentoring work specifically, if you have mentors who mentored you, you know, as you were coming up, and if you have young people who you're reaching out to, and I'd be curious to hear about that.
Mm-hmm. I'll let Awet go first.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'll just try to keep my answer short. But once my first book was published in 2018, I had so many people reaching out to me, like from the deaf community, like asking, like, how are you doing this? And some people asked me to mentor them. And I also learned linguistics from that experience too. Like, not everybody has the same style. We have different ways that we veer off. Like in manga style, somebody might prefer that, or neo-realistic. That, you know, they still want to learn like how I do my process. Like, kind of sort of getting advice from like where they are now and like where they'll eventually get to. It's like how, you know, how to become disciplined, you know, how to commit and how to get to where they want to go, and like who to reach out to, like out in the community. It's that kind of big picture mentorship. So, and that's what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
So I am like I mentioned earlier, I'm a teaching artist. I do work with the Center for Art Inspired Learning, and so does Cynthia with Lake Erie Inc. But like, it's cool because we get contracted out to schools that don't have arts programming normally. So we kind of like come in and act as like their art teacher, or, you know, do projects with them throughout the year, something that's more short term instead of, you know, having the full funds to afford like an actual like teaching, you know, teaching licensed artists. But I have found like a lot of joy in that. I've been teaching since I was in college, like just in the summertime, working with like high schoolers and with K through 12. And so like my thing when I'm working with them is showing them that like you can, like art is a profession that you can pursue successfully. And so, because a lot of people don't know that, and they don't realize that a lot of their entertainment, a lot of the stuff that they get to enjoy as just regular people are made by artists. So I'm able to like go in and grab the people who are interested in like pursuing that kind of work and showing them that, hey, like, you know, you need to learn how to network. And like, that's something that I wish I knew like about when I was a kid, but that like weren't really available like in the late 90s, early 2000s, at least for me. So trying to getting those people who are interested in there early and showing them that, hey, if you keep working hard, if you keep trying to perfect your craft, if you network sooner rather than later, you can actually get those opportunities a lot sooner. And also being able to like, you know, work for yourself instead of like depending on trying to get a contract with Marvel or DC. You know, you can be an independent artist who can do their own thing until someone notices them, and then they can get more work from that. But I enjoy it, so.
Thank you. Thank you for asking a question, Lisa. Did anybody else want to answer?
I'd say similar. So, I am also a teaching artist. I've been doing it for about 8, almost 9 years now. And it's mostly with film work. So I had a couple of students that I feel like I've mentored over time, and they started to dabble on film outside of my programs that I've educated. And I've also done a couple of writing workshops for comic books that sometimes people have reached out to me afterwards, you know, and I've helped them formulate some of their writing stuff, their ideas and everything like that. So, and I remember just growing up and having certain teachers who it was like they took me under their wing when it came to certain topics I was involved in. And one particular mentor I'd say is David Hine, who has written many comic books for Marvel and DC and independent stuff. So I started off just being a fanboy, and then from fanboyism and him, I guess us interacting online and meeting in person, and he would sort of tell me about certain things of how the business works and certain other things, and he would read some of my writing and give me critiques and everything like that. So me remembering that also definitely comes to mind too when somebody reaches out to me and they show me that they actually have this passion, you know, and that they're doing the work to want to be with us, I guess, to share the table with us.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, Cynthia said, do we have any audience questions? I'm sorry, I've let everyone go over just because it's so interesting. I figured, like, why stop? Because I don't, I know we have so, I figured I was like, we could just stay until everybody leaves, but no, if there is, do we have any audience questions?
I don't see any audience questions, but real quick, I will say that about mentoring. When I was starting this comic book, yeah, a bunch of the local creators created the Cincinnati Comic Book Creators, and they would get together monthly at this coffee shop. And it was a great opportunity to just meet them, talk about best practices, learn about Comic Cons, how they do it. It wasn't just a drink and draw, even though there was drawing and there was drinking. But it was a great opportunity just to get together with different artists and writers and just talk. I mean, for the artists, if they wanted feedback, they could show a piece, and there was some sharing and stuff. But it's because we can't get together as much because of the pandemic. It's turned to Zoom, but it's the habit of getting together monthly. It's not always the same people, but it's a great mentoring and to be mentored opportunity, and just learn from people who have been doing it or learn from the people coming up.
No, thank you. Yeah. So if there's no audience questions, I do have a question just for fun. What are you all reading? What should we read? What are you all reading, and what should we read? So well, you can answer both.
All right. Well, like I mentioned, you can definitely check out that Bottom Feeders comic. It's really good. Yeah, it's like kind of like a sci-fi horror like comic about like I don't know. You have to read it. I don't want to reveal too much because it's insane. But I also recommend, I'm writing an autobio comic, so I've been doing a lot of research just in like autobio comics, and I came across Hot Comb by Ebony Flowers. And it's really good. I highly recommend it if you haven't already come across it at some point. And I haven't read this yet, but I've heard good things. It's called Twins. I believe it's by Shannon Wright and Johnson. I've heard great things. I have friends who are artists who've read it and who know these people, and so it's cool because it's a person of color who wrote it and illustrated it. So highly recommend.
I haven't read Twins, but I can definitely second Hot Comb. I can definitely second that one. I haven't read Twins yet, but Hot Comb I definitely second. So definitely everybody read that one. All right, who else wants to go?
I'll go next. So I'm currently reading Grant Morrison's Batman run.
Yeah.
Extremely huge book, and there's like 3 volumes. I started reading that. I'm currently reading also Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, which is really amazing. And next book afterwards is The Girl Who Married a Skull, which is also an anthology of other African folk tales, and it's like an anthology of various different artists, artwork. And
that sounds amazing.
So those 3.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, last one, Cynthia, is The Girl Who Married a Skull and other African stories.
Yeah, I definitely want to read that. Girl, that sounds amazing. Thank you. Who else wants to give us some recommendation?
Generally, in terms of representation and looking for interesting, diverse voices, I've been taking a lot of recommendations, and there are some graphic novels there too from the Brown Bookshelf. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they're an independent organization, and they really promote diverse writers and readers, and they've been doing some wonderful Zoom events over the last year and a half or so.
Nice.
And the last graphic novel I met, I know it's not new, but it was Jerry Craft's New Kid, which is
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry, what are you reading?
For my superhero fix, I'm reading Far Sector, which is so good. I was behind on a couple issues, but it's N.K. Jemisin and Jamal, who did Naomi for DC, and N.K. Jemisin, who's a science fiction writer. And then I'm doing kind of a book club with my daughters. So I'm reading all the Raina Tagelmeyer books, like Sisters, Guts, Smile, all that. And it's really well done. I think that the whole next generation of comic book readers are going to be more graphic novel readers as opposed to the single issues that we're used to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I love Guts. I love Raina Telgemeier. I think Guts is a great book. I definitely recommend that. It's a great depiction of anxiety, and really helps adolescents understand the experience of anxiety. I think it's a fantastic book. As a mental health practitioner, I definitely recommend it. All right, and totally Far Sector too. And then Awet, I think you're up. I don't know if anybody, if either Patty or Kelly, if you're able to. Oh, he's typing. Oh, okay.
You were just saying. So far, I started writing. When I started writing my book, I had to kind of. I was like in a lower headspace, to making the actual comic book. So I had to check out other independent graphic novels too, like this one, Biggest Bang. Reason being for me was that my first Comic-Con sale, it was in Long Beach here in California. It was a store here, so I went to check out other things, and they had an independent graphic novel artist. And I went to him, and I told him we exchanged books. I gave him mine, he gave me his, and I was reading it, and I was like, wow, this is like the same thing about like the cosmic universe or like world order. Like, this is pretty cool. And I was like, this was a pretty neat, and I wanted to advertise that too. Another one, I wanted to share something. It's not comics from what I've drawn, but this was from another Comic-Con.
Wow. Yeah.
Is it mythology?
Yeah, it's like yeah, it is. It's like set in the future. It's like pan-futurism.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that is really cool. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for all being such great participants that we got to go 20 minutes over, and it didn't even. And we just had so much to talk about. So thank you. This was fun. It was a great panel. I mean, at one point I was like, all right, we're just gonna keep talking. This is great. And the worry is always like, are we gonna have anything to talk about? And we did not. So this is great. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Any closing remarks by anybody? Any last chance for questions from the audience or comments?
I have a Patreon. Please go check it out. Sequoia Bostick Art.
Yes. Everybody go to the artists' pages and go to the Superhero Project page as well. And thank you all for joining. And feel free, and Cynthia said there'll be a video at some point, right? So feel free to share the video if you liked what you saw. Feel free to share the video with others that weren't here.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope you come back to hear Alison Bechdel talk tonight. Somebody else who really spoke to youth in the LGBTQ community back when there weren't that many voices, and also on issues of mental health and living with family members with mental health. And also after that, after Alison's program, we are having an over 18 after party, because I know some of you guys want to just keep talking. So it's BYOB. If you want to pop in, I've made a room, and I will make an extra room if you know we have too many people in there, so that we can keep talking in the evening. Okay, because we already have to be here for the teen after party anyway, so we might as well, right? Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Look in your emails. You'll be getting an email from me on Monday. Thanks to the people in our audience who are mostly other artists, I think. Hopefully we'll reach some more kids and teachers and people who care about comics through the recording too. So,
yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye,
for having
everybody.
me.
I think we might keep recording until we turn it off. So if you want to keep talking to each other, go to the green room.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Where will this be posted? Matt just asked, where will this be posted?
There'll probably be a link on our social media, and it'll probably show up on our YouTube page too. Okay?
Sounds good. Okay, sounds good.
All right. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Cynthia.
Bye. Thank you, Patty. And thank you, Kelly. Yeah.
Oh, sure. I'll see you back at 6.
Yeah, see you soon. All right.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.